Hello, everyone. I am Mr. Hussam, and today we are talking about verb tenses again. This is the third and last video in our series of videos on verb tenses. So, if you haven't watched the other two videos, I highly recommend that you do so. You will find the links to those two videos in the cards at the end of this one. Let's kick off with today's lesson. It's about perfect tenses. We will be covering all perfect tenses: present, past, and future. As a start, let me just remind you that verb tenses are very important, and that's why we study them. We need to be clear on the tense, on the time of the event, on the time of the action that we are talking about. All right, let's get started with the present perfect tense. This tense, even though it says present, but this tense describes an action that actually started in the past, and that action continues up to the present. It continues till now, till the moment of speaking. So if we say something like, he has lived in Dubai for 2 years, that means the action of living there in Dubai has started 2 years ago and it continues till now. So the speaker of this sentence, or the person who is intended in this sentence, still lives in Dubai. So the action started in the past 2 years ago. It's still true till now. All right? That's how we use the perfect tense. You can say something like, she has worked in this company for 5 years. That also means the action of her working in that company started 5 years ago. It is till now. So the person who is intended in this sentence actually still working there. All right. The present perfect tense is also used in another sense, which is we talk about something that actually happened in the past and was completed in the past. However, mentioning the exact time of the event is not that important. And here I want you please to compare this tense or this case in particular, to how we use the simple past, if you still remember from the previous videos. The simple past is also used to talk about events in the past. However, we need to be very accurate when it comes to mentioning the time of the event. Here in the present perfect, the most important thing is the action itself, not the time. Here are examples. I have seen that movie before. That means I want to focus on the event itself, the information that I want you to know, or the thing that I want to deliver to you through this sentence is that the event of watching this movie actually happened earlier than now. At exactly what time? That's not very important. We don't care. We care more about the event itself. Or if we say something like, he has already visited Vietnam, we want to focus on the action itself rather than the timing. All right. However, if you compare it to the simple past, as I told you, we need to be clear on the timing. So we say something like, I visited Vietnam last year. I am very specific with the timing of the event, which is last year. Here, we don't care. Maybe the guy has visited Vietnam 2 years ago, 1 month ago, probably, or last week. Who knows? We don't care. What we want to deliver to you through this sentence is that the action itself is very important. All right. So I have seen that movie. If you're discussing with a friend, suggesting or recommending to you a certain movie to watch, and you go like, oh, I have seen that movie before, can you suggest something else? In this scenario, as you notice, you are more concerned about the fact that you actually watched it, not the time of watching itself. All right. So in a way, this is the basic difference between using the simple past and the present perfect in this sense, in scenarios like that. Now, moving on, we have another tense, which is the present perfect progressive. And I want you please to remember that the word progressive entitles that we have a verb in the ing form all the time. So here it's like a combination of a perfect tense and also the ing form. So you might expect to have more than one verb in the sentence. So the main verb and the auxiliary verbs. All right. Here, in almost all perfect progressive tenses, the only thing you need to remember about them is that here we focus more on the duration of the event, on the time that the event took in order to happen. So, if I say something like, he has been studying grammar for an hour. Notice I am very much concerned with the underlined phrase, for an hour. That's why we use perfect progressive. I could have used present perfect if I don't want to highlight the duration for an hour. I could have simply said, he has studied grammar. All right? And most people would use these two tenses interchangeably. Unless you want to focus on the duration, you can use the perfect tense, not the perfect progressive. All right. However, in very correct grammar and in exams, if you see the duration and you have different options to choose from, always go for the perfect progressive tense. All right. So he has been studying grammar for an hour. I want to stress the timing, the duration. She has been cooking all day. Again, I want to emphasize the fact that she's been doing that all day. The duration is very important, of course, along with the action itself. All right, and let's have a look at the parts of this tense. We have the auxiliary verb here, and we always have been in all progressive tenses, been and ing form, studying, cooking, playing, or any other verb. All right, so here my concern, my main focus, the emphasis lies on the duration itself. All right, another thing we want you to remember is actually we use this tense to talk about something which is in progress or have been in progress, but for a temporary period, or it's not going to last longer than that. Something like in this sentence here, she has been living in Thailand for the last 2 months, but she plans to move soon. So the event of living in Thailand is going to end very soon. It's temporary, all right? So she's been living there, but she's moving, all right? Now we're gonna move to the past perfect. This tense describes events that are completed before something else takes place in the past or took place in the past. Let me just make this clear for you. Remember in the first video in this series when we talked about the simple past, I told you that we need to compare this tense specifically to other tenses so they make sense. Now we compared it to the present perfect just to make sense that we don't care about the exact timing. Here we also need to talk about the simple past, because here in the past perfect it's like I have two actions to talk about or two things to mention. One of them, or actually the two of them happened in the past, but one of them happened before the other. So if you look at the timeline here, I have this event, let me call it event number 1 and event number 2. Both of them happened in the past. If we consider this line the present, now the time of speaking, and here is the future, so both of them happened in the past here. However, if we look at the timeline, this event happened first and then this one followed. So we have two events. The first one, the one that happened earlier, we use the past perfect with it. And in order to talk about the other event, event number 2, we use the simple past in order to describe it. So let's have a look at the first example and apply our knowledge here. The Titanic had received many warnings before it hit the iceberg. So I have two events here, two things. The Titanic has received many warnings, and the Titanic hit the iceberg. Which one happened first? From this sentence, I can conclude that receiving warnings happened earlier. So I use had received. I use the past perfect with it. And then the Titanic hit the iceberg after receiving the warnings. All right. So hitting the iceberg happened later. So I use the simple past with it. That's why the sentence looks like that. The Titanic had received earlier here many warnings before it actually hit the iceberg. All right. So this tense is always used in a combination of past perfect plus simple past. All right. Look at the other example. I had already eaten when my friend stopped by to visit. So again, two actions. Action number 1, I had eaten. Action number 2, my friend stopped by to visit. So stopping by, as you can see here, we used it in the simple past because it actually happened after I have eaten, or I had eaten, to be more precise. All right, so please remember I have two actions. Both of them happened in the past. Action number 1, I use the past perfect, which is always had plus verb 3. And then the other one, I use simple past. All right. Now we move on to the past perfect progressive. Remember, past perfect progressive always has ing in it. And the same way, we only use it just to emphasize the duration of time. All right. So let's go straight to the example. She had been driving around the city for 3 hours before she finally found the right office. So it's actually exactly like the past perfect. Again, I have two actions, driving and then finding the right office. So nothing changes except for one thing. My emphasis is on the duration of the action. So it took her 3 hours, of course, in the past. It took her 3 hours to find the right office. So her driving, let's say, started here at 6 o'clock, and it wasn't before 9 o'clock that she found the right office. But the whole thing happened in the past. Remember, that's why it's called past perfect progressive. So the same thing with past perfect, except for more emphasis on the duration. All right. Now we come to the future perfect. In this tense, we are trying to say that at some point in the future, an action will have completed or will have been finished. All right. So I don't know if it is difficult to make sense, but just consider the fact that perfect tenses, they all mean that the action is completed. So the completion of this tense is actually measured against a certain point. Let's have a look at the example and then we explain it on the timeline here. We will have finished the exam by the time class ends tomorrow. So the point in time, the point in the future that I am measuring the action against is this one here. When the class ends tomorrow, this is the time that I want to consider the event against. What is the main event? The main event is this one. We will have finished our exams. So we will have finished our exam maybe at a certain point here, or maybe here, or maybe here, or maybe even here. Anytime before the class ends, I complete my action, then I'm fine. All right, so by tomorrow, or by the end of the class tomorrow, we will have finished our exams. So everybody in class will have finished, everybody will be done with their exams before the end. All right. Future perfect progressive, again, same story with all the other progressive tenses. The emphasis is on the duration of time. So by the time he finishes law school, we will have been living in the US for 8 years. So again, I am measuring, or actually considering, the main event, which is living in the US here, against this point in the future when the guy will finish his law school. So by the time this happens, the duration will be 8 years. So let's say that at this point in the future, we will go to the US, and then after 8 years in the US, the guy will finish his law school. By the time he finishes law school, basically, logically speaking, how many years we will have been spending there? 8 years. So by the time he finishes law school, we will have been living. Remember, there's always ing in that tense, and the emphasis is on the duration of time itself. All right, this is it for the perfect tenses. This is everything that we want to focus on. I wish by now all verb tenses are clear for you, and remember, we will have more practice on them. Just stay tuned, and in your Google Classrooms you will find a lot of activities, online quizzes, and so on and so forth. Until we meet again, take care. Bye bye.